Ladies and gentlemen, so many crazy things have been happening in the news lately, but I don't have time to pay attention to all that negativity because I have recently graduated therapy. And that is sort of a hot buttony thing with some people. They're like, oh, it ends. Like even some people who work in the field might be like, well, that's, I don't know, what would the word be? Like presumptuous or something.
So immediately my mind goes to Parks and Recreation, Chris Traeger and his therapist, how like he made him make his therapist a certificate of completion. You remember that?
Which one is
therapy?
Who,
I
Chris
cried.
Traeger?
It's Rob Lowe.
Oh, just say Rob Lowe. I can never remember that dude's character. I can remember like
Chris is like one of the best.
No, he's my favorite, but I just call him Rob Lowe because I didn't know he was on the series. And when I first saw him, I was just like, I didn't realize.
Dr. Richard Nygaard. He graduated from Dr. Richard Nygaard. Seeing him 7 days a week or whatever it was.
I didn't realize like that Rob Lowe was eventually going to be in the series when I started watching it. I started watching it after it was already done on the internet or streaming things.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, Rob Lowe's on this. I'm so glad he's keeping busy. I've missed Rob Lowe. And from there on, I just thought Rob Lowe too many times. I'm like, that's that character's name. And I think later I grew to be like, yeah, he is like the funniest thing on the show. I will tell this to anybody. I think I was repeating it at work even a while ago. Oh, because some people were talking about Parks and Rec. And like, my favorite thing that Rob Lowe says in the entire... Actually, I think my favorite bit in the whole show, and I do find
I know what you're going to say. I know what it is.
Yeah, is when Andy becomes a security guard, and he goes... They're going back and forth about his responsibilities, and Andy eventually just goes like, the important thing is that I'll have a gun that I could point in people's faces, and Rob Lowe just smiles at him and goes, incorrect.
Yeah.
The timing is... God, it's one of the funniest things on any TV show. And the two of them, when they would interact, is always like, I mean, it's going to be funny.
Yes.
But yeah, so he graduated from therapy. And there's a lot of trappings of that. I totally understand where you'd be like, this is just some like egomaniacal person's like thing. It's like, well, I'm all better now. I finished it. Da, 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 da. Or perhaps a sign that you're working with a real quack. But obviously, it depends on what you're dealing with, what you're trying to manage, and then like all these other extenuating factors or whatever. And it's like, but in my case, and my good friend, and he's also an open book on Facebook, so I'm not like outing anybody here. My good friend David Murder also would go to therapy before I started, and he got to a point where his guy was like, "You're done now. I think you're good." I mean. Things will come up, but you have the tools and you seem to know how to use them. And I think that's sort of the sign that it's over is when they're like, I think you have this, though. There's nothing left for us to talk about, really.
So in your case and David's case, when I saw it, it's like, I was so, of course I'm happy for you two because you both are great people. But it makes me sad because it's like, when's it going to be my turn? I think I'm just going to be like in the nut house forever.
I'm just going to be in the nut house forever. This is a very maudlin scene from our Disney movie, In the Nut House.
And I, like point out the people out there who are like me. It's like, our therapy's never going to end, but we shouldn't feel bad about it.
No.
We should be happy for our friends who are able to solve their issue, and move on. Like that's great. It's a great thing, even though it's like.
As a very strong, competent alpha male, I kick ass at everything, including mental health. Fuck yeah, bro. No, that's not what... See, that's, I think, how some people view when you say something like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, I didn't, but...
No, I know you didn't. I'm just talking about the internet at large.
Yes.
But, yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter, though, is that it's just, like, true. Like, David doesn't have a podcast. His story was very funny that he posted under my thing when I was posting about it, where, his guy was kind of just like, and, it's been a pleasure talking to you, but I do have to keep charging you. So I think, I think we're all good. But David's thing was like, so do I hug you now? And his therapist just goes, no. And it was very funny that he had that sitcom moment in real life that I'm jealous of. But my thing was more like, I was just talking about all the different, like, when I went a lot for my anger and stuff. And, it's like when I noticed myself just getting incredibly mad about something now, And I know this was like assisted by ketamine and stuff, obviously, but this place I've gotten to,
choice.
but like when I start getting really mad about something, it's like I'm watching someone else do it and going like, what is that guy really all that upset about? Like that is the mechanism that now occurs.
And that is super, like, when you read about other people's ketamine experiences, that's, a similar thing of when you're able to see outside of yourself. And you could see the...
Regularly leaving your body in a nice little office twice a week will do that for you.
Or broom closet, depending on which side of the building.
I was only on the other side. This is so inside baseball, but I was only on the other side once. It was weird.
Yeah.
I only had like the supermodels tending to me over in the fancy side of the ketamine. So this ketamine clinic that both of us go to.
Yes. Go ahead.
It's in this office building, and like there's a side on either side of a hallway or whatever. Like one of them has like no windows in it. But the weirdest thing is though is that like the rooms are smaller and there's no windows. I preferred that. And also
most people do.
The windowless one is where I had when I had my ketamine treatment right before stand-up comedy, and where I got myself all jacked up. So instead of being tired afterwards, I was like just on one and like a machine. Like it was. I'll get back into this story. I kind of cut you off.
You know what I was going to say? Because I can tell this story because I was the one who made it up. When I started going to the ketamine place, it's been a year now. The first time I went, like everybody was like beautiful, like just tall.
Yeah, they look like they worked in orthopedics. That's
like not even just like they look like they could be models. And then the nurse that was actually giving me my IV, talking with him, and realized he was from California, and like everybody from California is hotter, sort of.
Yeah.
And then
except for everyone we know that moved there, Jesus.
Well, whatever.
I'm still following a lot of Instagrams, and boy, that bad hair I think is getting to their skin.
Meh.
I know.
But anyway, and so there's two sides, basically, also called Ketamine 1, Ketamine 2, but I called that the California side because it was full of, like, just extraordinarily, really pretty people. And then on the other side, the other thing to mention is on the California side, it was nice big offices with, like...
they'd have like multiple recliners and stuff in them. Like people could sit in there and.
So on the other side, the people that tended to it was just like regular people, not ugly or I'm not trying to like say anything. They're just regular people that we see around the Midwest.
Right. Yeah.
Our regular Midwest folks.
Dental hygienists that don't have an Instagram page.
And then on that side, it was like the rooms are really small, so you're like in a weird like broom closet, but it's really cool because it's darker when you're doing.
Because I'm an eyes shut guy.
Yeah. But anyway,
like
so
I
called that side the Midwest side.
Yeah.
So because you've got your fancy California, good looking people, and then you're like just regular.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know. It was funny to me. It's probably not funny to anyone else, but like that's how I refer to that place.
I just was like waiting because you told me about this long before I started, and I was just like, I don't know. I didn't want to go to the other side, and then this one time I actually like went over there. I was like, I kind of like this better, and then I never ended up over there again.
It was really awesome when they used to bring out on that side. They would bring the galaxy machines, and it was just like a light that looked like the aurora borealis.
Yeah, it was just project kind of on everything.
Float. And I had,
But you can keep your eyes open during this because, like, they're like clamped shut. I'm like, I have to. If I stay like this, I'm 100% good. If I open them, everything just spins. Like I'm like, dude.
I actually watch a video on my iPod and listen to music.
Yeah, I listen to music.
So colors are a really big thing with me, and the movements and the shapes of how I'm like perceiving things and where my thoughts will go during ketamine. So
yeah.
When I close my eyes, and I've tried. It's just I don't really get anything.
That's so interesting.
It's not like I don't get anything, but it's just kind of I personally need a very slow moving thing to concentrate on, because then I don't get dizzy. If I try to focus on like any of the pictures in the room, because they have really beautiful like paintings and stuff in there, then I'll get dizzy, and then I won't, won't have a good time.
We got to think about. I wonder if this is like. Maybe I should just pitch this to the doctor that runs. I'm sure they're not interested in my fucking like business ideas. And I'm not going to Ben Hurley this thing, but like you know what? Where I would do the absolute best as far as one of these like IV ketamine treatment things in a fucking Joe Rogan float tank, like deprivation. Mm-hmm. That would actually be for me, because like even though the light, I figured out I started like covering my eyes, like I take my sweater off and like wrap it around my face. Like,
they have sleep masks.
They do, but I always forget. But I made it dark myself. And it's like the darker it is, the more things I actually see. Mm-hmm. The more like patterns that end up turning into like the spiritual stuff that I could. And
I may try that in my next session then, just to try to
because
close my eyes and
Yeah.
'Cause I think I'm on the Midwest side, the dark side.
Yes.
So maybe I'll give it a try.
Yeah, keep that Ark of the Covenant from exploding you. But yeah, this is going to be so all over the place. I'm going to try to stick at first to okay. So I made a bold statement with the way this thing is. We talked about how like therapy can
end. I'm sorry. I
and
got you way off base. But
I know that like, well, being on the proper chemical compounds has sped up the thing where it's like I can kind of see outside of myself a little bit and then like be a little bit more like in my place in the world or whatever. For one thing, like Adderall was something I think I was just fucking immensely always supposed to be on.
Probably.
And the ketamine thing definitely sped things up. And my therapist, who I'm going to steer this back to, he did. I was talking to him about it on basically what was ended up being our last visit. That ketamine and Adderall are actually like a like powerful more than their sum of their parts thing like together, because when you're someone that needs Adderall, it's because your brain kind of needs these stimulants to kind of keep it firing in like the right way that it's supposed to stay focused and even and whatever. But if you're doing that on ketamine and you're having a very healing process, it's actually like digging out those channels in your brain almost more. So your brain is starting to rewire itself into something that's always on Adderall or a normal brain or whatever, like for you. And so he was like, honestly, like the sort of the, it's not like I better not take this today and then like or whatever. It's like you were kind of like overdriving your thing. But he also did definitely say that like going in with very specific intentions was like super helpful. And I wouldn't have really had such of a grip on the right ones to kind of like, or the right way to look at things on the way in had I not already been in therapy for months and months and months before I started this, nearly a year or whatever. And, but I, all right, where was I? Because I was talking about David's last thing of therapy was funny. He's like, do I hug you? No. I just thought of like a Homer asking in a Simpsons, like, do I hug you?
Yeah.
No. Like the fucking 50s looking psychiatrist that would tell him that. Like, I just imagine that scenario with him. But my very last one was just this whole thing of, it was like the end of a weird movie or something. Because I was just saying like, well, now I like more not in the same way, but like when Morgan Freeman does that thing at the end of The Shawshank Redemption when he talks about how they shouldn't let him go or whatever because it's just like it makes no difference to me. Like it felt like that though, the way I was talking without trying to, where I'm like, yeah, I mean, basically when this happens now, I just do this, and it's like I kind of know what all my weird defense mechanisms are and why I have them, and like I can kind of see around it. And the big thing for me, we were talking about this earlier too, is that I always used to have. So in my therapy sessions, and this is the thing, for anybody and no one there's not going to be a lot of one-to-one here. This is going to be rambly, but if you're someone that responded to my Facebook post and you're one of the, and I will use no one's name here, but my God, the amount of DMs I got after that post of people being like, and text messages, because other people I knew, being like, so did you, usually thank you for being so open. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, is John talking about, I'm like, well, I am, but there was like 53 other people, so don't worry. Who are like, either it was like someone close to them or them themselves, and they were kind of like, thank you so much. And I'm like, dude, I'm just a guy that'll yell about anything. Like, I wasn't doing it to try to help anybody, but does it warm my heart very much and make me very happy that it might have been helpful to some people and they started going on their mental health journey when they otherwise maybe were a little hesitant to? Right. Well, then that is fantastic. I love that. That's very good. That wasn't the point of me sharing. But I was like, I got teary, like, reading some of these things.
Aww.
And, like, well, because I was happy. I was like, okay,
that's
we're good.
Great. No, I like when you can make a difference in someone's day and potentially life. That's amazing.
Yeah, and, it was like, and one of the things I had discussed with my therapist was that, like, and that he helped me figure out is like I talked a lot about my like music and my past and everything. Like I really just, as I said, I just got into the mud and started flooring it. I'm like, well, this happened and I'm like this and I did a lot of this and da 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 da. And I tried to give him a real good. He's a professional. Like I tried to give him a real good grip on who I am and what I'm dealing with and everything instead of making him drag it out of me. And he had some funny stories kind of along the way. He's a nice guy to talk to. I like my therapist, but. He's like, I mean, I'm not putting down other people that I have to see here, but it has been kind of easy working with you because you don't talk about your cat for 45 minutes and then maybe touch on something a little weird. And then our time's up like 10 minutes later. Like you just come in and you're like, okay, so today here's what I would like to address. And it's stuff that I would normally have to beat out of people for a month. I'm going twice a week or whatever. And like, yeah.
Being around the mental health field, I definitely can pick those people out. Especially when they're checking in for their appointments. Cause
always, like, by the way, I was like, there was someone who I'm like, that's the sad kitty cat person. Like, I fucking knew. I was like, oh, there they are.
Yes.
But... so by doing that, I shared a lot, and it's where, I realized I never really like thought about this, but in my heyday of music, I only ever saw the empty spaces in between people in the crowd. No matter how many people were there, no matter how excited they were, I would be focused on the people in the back who were less excited. I'd be focused on the empty spots at the edges of the pit where there could have been more people getting more crazy rather than all the people that were there. Right. And some of you know what I'm talking about. Like, they're like, what? Like, that's all you saw? And I'm like, yeah, because it's like I just needed that constant growth and whatever. And it's like, and that, I was ambitious. And dissatisfaction is a symptom of ambition, like very much so.
You needed way more validation than
and now validation's great and a job well done is great and whatever. But like I was telling my therapist that I've kind of just gotten to this thing where I'm like, I'm very happy being fun and helpful or maybe even impressive artistically or whatever, but just with the people that are already around. Like, I just want people at work to be like, John's doing good things. And it's fucking, I don't care beyond that. Or if I'm doing stand-up comedy, it's like, I don't worry that there's only 11 people there. It's more like, do they think this, are they laughing and having fun when I'm up there?
Yeah.
Like, I don't give a single shit. It's not like, I'm going to fill this place one day. I'm going to be such a big comedian. Like, I don't give a fuck. And I mean, part of that's where I am in my life now, where I'm like, not as interested in all that stuff. But rather than being completely like, I'm just going to run away from it, I can still be creative and be who I am, which is someone who just creates things and tries to make people laugh and makes stuff that people go, oh, that's cool. Like, that's just who I am. Like, I like to do that. I'm a thing maker. And like, but I'm just more like, it's a fun thing for whoever's already in my life. And I just appreciate that more. And that's weird. I actually had like a real breakthrough in that way that you hear about on TV or something. And obviously my therapist saw that, and among a bunch of other things. But I was kind of just talking to him that last day, like, I don't know, I feel kind of good. I don't really know, like, what else to bring up with you, so should we maybe just do this, like, once a month or something? And he was just like, well, how about this? If you ever feel like you need to talk, you can always reach out, and we can set something up then. And he just sticks his hand out, like, otherwise, it was been a real pleasure talking to you. And then I was like, oh. And I was kind of like, that's weird that this sort of ends. And he's of the opinion that he's like, therapy is supposed to be linear. It's just that, like, well, it might take a year, it might take a lifetime. Mm-hmm. But it does go in a straight line. but it's just the amount of factors are just totally fucking crazy. And I also think that as non-textbook as I like to consider myself in the world or whatever, I'm guessing that in the people that have worked with me's business, I actually probably was fairly textbook. It was just a little easier than usual because I'm like, oh, I'll tell you all about it. You don't got to fucking trick me into going like, oh, some bad things happened when I was younger. I'm like, let me tell you about the bad things that happened when I was younger.
It also helps me.
Here's how they made me feel like shit.
It helps me a little more self-aware too. And you are, and I am, like, I've been told by a lot of people, like, extremely self-aware.
You definitely are, I think.
It's just like...
You don't walk around in a cloud of, like, I'm doing fine. What's everybody's problem?
In, like, you know, group therapies, people would be shocked about just the insight I had about myself. I'm like, really? You don't... I mean, I guess I understand everybody's different, but you really don't... You don't have that... You don't know yourself.
Well,
like,
yeah, but you know what's funny? You don't really know what's interesting about yourself until you run up against other people. Like I had, like just as a simple fun thing that I think no one's gonna really refute, but I didn't think I was. I've always been a silly man, as you know, but like I didn't particularly think I was like that witty or funny until I was the more and more people I'm around, particularly other normal people and maybe not crazy artists and stuff, like, man, I never thought about it like that. That's so interesting and funny. And I'm like, God, I hear that so much. I'm like, wait a minute, am I interesting and funny? Like, yeah. It's like, but then you always, since you're you always look at other people and like, do you not think about anything like this at all? I'm like, no, you're thinking about trucks. Yeah, that is, okay, yeah, all right.
Well, that also makes me think of the interesting thing of like how some people have an inner monologue or, and some people like don't. And I can't understand that because I'm like, just because it's impossible almost to understand how the other person's brain works.
Yeah, you really can't.
It's just, because I am constantly, I'm not necessarily hearing my own voice, but I'm hearing me thinking, so I guess I don't get it. It's so hard. The other one, I don't understand it.
Well, they recently figured out, there used to be this thing, it's like people that talk to themselves are schizophrenic and da-da-da. And now that we understand things better, they're like, even talking to yourself when you're trying to figure something out is a sign of like advanced like intelligence. It's very much, you're like working, because what you're doing is you're working something out as if you're talking to someone else. So like I've caught myself doing this where, actually, easy example, and why I think this was recognized, and I'm kind of like done going to therapy, is at this point, I've made a complete analog model of I almost said his fucking full name, of my therapist in my brain. Mm-hmm. So I can now go, when I think of something a little fucked up, I can imagine myself talking to him and exactly what he would say to me. And I'm like, okay, well then like, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then it's just sometimes that evolves, like, if I'm at work, I'm like, I talk to myself a lot just so you all know, like, again, I don't get embarrassed easily, but I do warn people just so it's not. Yeah. They're like, all right, like, listen. And I'm like, okay, so I put that over there already. But if we're going to do that, the only way to get this to work with that is if it was, so the only disconnect is if this thing wasn't on in the first place, which it wasn't. So I have to go turn, like, but people are like, well, that's like a sign of being crazy or maybe dumb. And then now they're like, no, really smart people. Like it's more likely that like Albert Einstein was sitting there like, well, it's the thing that if you do the two, but that cannot be because like it's very likely that everybody like that in history was like that, and it's like, and all that is an extension of the inner monologue where you're actually facilitating almost a second person that you're talking with to hash something out in a way that most people couldn't do unless they actually had a second person there that was also pretty smart, that was helping them work it out. You could do that on your own.
My mom used to always talk to herself like,
I'm sure,
the most out of anyone I've known. But it's interesting that you bring that up, that there are, it's hard for me to think that, there are people that actually have to have another person to bounce off of, and they can't just, bounce off kind of themselves.
Well, it's a really crazy, like it. I can see where it's like all of this stuff we're talking about. It's likened it to the Force, where there's like a light and a dark side of it a little bit. And because I could so clearly see that the dark side to a lot of this self-actualization and understanding is like being incredibly and successfully manipulative. Because, like at work, for example, I've almost completely analoged my very intelligent but very enigmatic boss. So, like, I know now exactly, like, what he would say if he was here, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And the fun part is I'll sit there and do that, and everybody will kind of laugh and be like, honestly, you're probably 100% right. That is what he would do. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I got that.
You know what's interesting?
By the way, you're all in there, too. But it's fun with him because he's such a powerful guy. But I'm like, I think he'll love this, and everyone will disagree. And I'll be like, no, because here's why. Because da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And they're like, oh, yeah, he probably will. And then it ends up that he did.
I think you and I are very similar in the fact that we're very hyper observant and we can pick up on patterns very quickly. So therefore, learning people's personality, traits and little like idiosyncrasies, it's, you can almost predict what they're going to do.
After a while, you almost have made like an AI simulation of that person in the holodeck of your brain. Like, that's what you've done. Our friend Bernard had said that once, where he's like, a lot of times when I'm just sitting there drawing when a bunch of people are talking, I'm listening and just filing that shit away.
Yeah.
That's so great. I remember being like, and he's obviously a very intelligent guy, so it's like, oh, you're running that whole thing. Mm-hmm. That's, but, yeah, like, I think that lended itself a little bit to me being like, well, yeah, like, but it's just interesting having, sorry, I'm skipping all over the place, but it's interesting having my therapist almost recognize that in me and as a good thing. And of course, I would also just run it by him too. I'm like, is it evil that I do this? He's like, I think it's pretty useful as long as you don't use it for evil.
I just want to say another thing, like, just if your brain doesn't work how we're describing with inner monologue, that doesn't mean you're stupid or we're smarter than you. Well, whatever, John, you could have your own opinion. I'm
agreeing with my eyebrows.
Because I can't understand how that looks like. I can't possibly do it, so I can't understand. How can we say that, we're smarter?
I don't know. I'll throw a thing out there. Literally everyone I've ever met that's just kind of like, oh no, I don't. They don't think about anything, and literally every funny little thing that we take for granted is like, did you ever notice it? It blows their goddamn mind. So it's like, I'm not being mean, but I think there is the kind of people that go like, oh, how'd you think of that? You must have a lot of time on your hands. I'm like, it took me 5 seconds. What were you thinking about in the last 5 seconds? Like, oh no, nothing. Like, yeah, okay. But maybe they're just as smart as we are. No, okay, I just had to do that. I'm sure.
I must surround myself around, the like-minded brains.
You do.
So
we all find each other.
Yeah.
That's very much a thing. Like, it's very, like, my wife and I both discovered late in life that we have ADHD, and, like, we have all these things in common, and we had some things where we butted heads, and then like later as we grew, we were like, oh, it's because we're too similar. Yep, like that's what happens. And all kinds of neurodivergent people tend to find each other. Like people on the spectrum tend to hang out even if they don't even know they're on the spectrum. It's just a whole thing. And like, so very much, I kind of just magically. There maybe aren't that many people in the world that are like me or you or whatever, but there's a lot. There's still a lot. Pound for pound, there's a lot. We just don't realize, like, the people that make country music bigger than pop music, we just don't ever see them, except for maybe you at work. Like, they're very, they're like, when you run into one, you're like, what the hell is this? Like, okay, this story is funny. I went to, like, Alexis had a friend. This is not going to be vague on purpose. It's going to be vague because I barely remember. But she had this friend that I think might have been from high school or something. And she got like a house or whatever. And like she had a little thing. And I was like, yeah, I'll go to anybody's parties. There's going to be booze there. She's like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I go with, and they're talking. And there's not a lot of people there yet. But there's like her dude, the lady's husband probably, that live there, the young couple. And then there's like 3 other dudes. And they're standing in the living room kind of like having this conversation. And I contemplated, like maybe I'll go talk to them, but I listened for a little bit first. And I listened to these four guys talk about sports.
Oh, God.
But that's fine. Sports is funny, and it's
Yeah.
one of my favorite comedians, whose jacket I'm basically wearing right now, has many good things about football that almost make me want to watch it. At least if it happened how he describes it, and it's not Doug Stanhope, ladies and gentlemen. But it's like I could talk to Chris Massimore a little bit about like a football thing, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Or I like in Always Sunny when they're trying to do a baseball joke, and like I can go to like a hockey game in person and actually be pretty entertained by it. Like it's fine. It's not
but
nothing.
When I was grimacing about,
No.
I kind of know where you're going.
But yeah, I know you know. These dudes talked about stats and stuff, and like it never even spiraled out into like, oh, and then this guy got traded. It's like, by the way, like there was someone who was supposed to be him in this movie once, and this movie's kind of funny. This actor, and it, like never got away from just like listening to fucking 10-year-olds talk about baseball cards, except they were like 20-year-old, mid-20s grown-up dudes in hats, and like they just were like yeah, and blah 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 blah. And I was still waiting because I'm like, God, like, because I can hang too. I'm like, if this veers off into cars, I can jump in a little,
Right. Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
If it veers off into guns, I can jump in. If it I can do this.
Yeah.
It never. I don't even know if it got off of baseball. Like it didn't even go over to a different sport. Like it didn't go over to like boxing or some shit where I could be like, hey, did you see this one fight? They'd be like, oh yeah, you liked anything. It just never, for fucking hours. And then just eventually some other people showed up, and I ended up talking to this like 50-year-old guy that was like a mailman that was about to retire about a bunch of weird psychedelic shit. And I'm like, okay, now I'm here.
You're with your people.
And that's the thing though. That dude was of that cloth where I could like, he was kind of like he was a pretty low-key guy, but he was like talking to Tommy Chong or something. He was like, okay, I can talk to this dude about all kinds of weird stuff, and he's going to have fun, and so am I. Those are those guys. And it's like, I was even in the same room with them. And I think I like said, I was like, I like to be a man. I was like, how you doing? John Wheeler. I'm good at that. And they're like, hey, yeah. And they just, went off to do their thing. And then they just locked into this thing. And I'm like, yeah, they don't think about, they're just sports, penis. No, sports. Like, and I know, I was
also
like,
weird that
I don't think those guys have these deep fucking.
It kind of breaks like the whole, like, you have other people you don't know and guests code. Like, don't you want to kind of like have them kind of included?
They weren't thinking about that. That would be thinking about the world around them. And it's not that I'm not really making fun of like the sports thing. You could replace that with anything. But yeah, they weren't going, oh yeah, shit, I should probably like, because, it would be a good thing to do. Like, no, that's not there. They just tailgate people when they drive.
That you're just kind of like by yourself, just standing there.
Well, I was kind of hanging around with the women, which, by the way, this was reminding me of my much younger days too. And I figured out that it's like hanging around being funny with the ladies is why those guys are like, oh, come, my wife keeps cheating on me with this guy in a band. Like, it's like, it was, I was there with Alexis, but it was like, wow, this even feels like an older iteration of life, because it's like they're just so like whatever, and it's like I don't know if the gals there were any different, but they're willing to like. I didn't go into the living room to talk about a ball with those guys for hours, so like, and the people who throw them about. So I just sat there being funny with like them, and they were having a great time. And even that, like, nobody in that living room was like, should we keep an eye on what's going on in the kitchen? Because I hear a man's voice going blah 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 hee an awful lot while we're not paying any attention, because they wouldn't, no matter what was going on. Like Peter North could be there with his wang hanging out, and they'd be like, until they physically saw it go in someone else's butt, be like, hey! Like, but they'd have to see it happen to like go to break away from Joe Bauer and his business and go on about, go over and be like, why are you fucking my wife, porn man? But if it's just like all of the clues and trappings loudly happening leading up to that, wouldn't even faze them, because they're not like thinking about anything ever. And again, not necessarily just making fun of those dudes or sports, or anything like that. I'm just saying that like, that's most people. Which isn't to say that, like, oh, it's like a tiny little 1% of, like, interesting, intelligent, da-da-da. No, there's tons of them, and there's gradients to it. There's plenty of people who have the artist mindset that aren't even really into the arts, but you can talk to them. Yeah, there's lots of them, and, you know, maybe it's even like 40%, but that big 60 is just all over the place, and they don't think about anything. They're the kind of people who don't understand why everything bad always happens to them when all they do is like blow their paycheck on lottery tickets and shit. They're just like, how come I'm always broke, fucking Obama? Like, they don't understand anything. They don't understand that it's like you're going around picking fights with people and now you have this criminal record that's always costed you like construction jobs and it's somebody's fault. Somebody peed my pants. Like, you just don't get it.
That's
and
such
like
a good phrase. Somebody peed my pants, because that's so accurate.
It was like, how come everything always happens to me? It's like, didn't you take a swing at like your son's like guidance counselor in the elementary school? And then it's like, yeah, now for no reason and unrelated to that, I'm losing custody to him because my wife's a fucking whore. That's the government for you. Like, they don't. And it's like, oh, I don't know what people who don't have an inner monologue are like. It's like, oh, they're like that. That's what they're like. Their brain didn't go, hey, guy, like, is this a smart idea? It's like, well, that guy fucking said something weird to me. It's like, okay, is punching him going to eventually lead to you losing custody of your son? It's like, I don't understand how all that would happen. That's court. That's different. Like, okay, punch that guy then. I don't care. And spend your last fucking few dollars on a fucking commemorative baseball card. Yeah, do whatever. And then bitch about how you can't fix your fucking truck. It's such a, like, you know what the wild thing is too? I had one of the glass blowers at work, Ty pointed this out, and this was very, we went to one of the, working in Northeast is fun because you can't throw a rock without hitting like a local brewery or something, so sure. Me and him and Derek, who listens to this for sure, but we went and had beers, and I was talking about, I just seen something on the internet, a meme that I agreed with, where it's like, no one that runs the world has ever done mushrooms, and only people who have done mushrooms know why that's a huge problem.
I sent
and you sent me
like
that. Yeah. And I said that to him, and he's much, much younger than me. Mm-hmm. He's like in his late 20s. And he was like, yeah, but a lot of people, like, some people will do that shit, and they'll just be like, I didn't get anything out of that. And it's like, oh, you're right. You're like, it doesn't even matter. It's like you could give Mitt Romney mushrooms and he's just going to be like, I don't know, stomach got upset. Anyway, I got to go to church. Like, it just wouldn't matter. Like, you already have to be someone who that would do something for that to end up making you into a better person that really understands things. Like, if you're just fucking Elon Musk, you're just going to take mushrooms and be like, well, it was interesting. It was interesting, Joe Rogan. I got to, I understand. And then you're just going to go back to fucking strip mining Africa with your parents' money. So it's like, yeah, okay. Like, that's... I was like, damn, you're right. Because I've been walking around going, everyone needs to do this kind of shit, man. Because everyone would be more empathetic. I'm like, I wonder, would they? When you don't have an inner monologue or like a fucking... There's be like,
we don't know this, Chad. We need to do more scientific research
Okay,
about
we're going to dose Elon Musk with LSD and ketamine and see what it comes out the other side.
How do we know that he doesn't have an inner monologue, though? I mean,
he's a bad example. He probably does. And it's just always like, money, you're important. And yeah, no, high-functioning people like that probably do. It's just probably evil. Like, it probably sounds like Darth Sidious. Like, it's just, but yeah, they're not a cog. They're not a peon. No, that's very incorrect. But giving those baseball guys mushrooms, they just be like, oh, I don't know, man. I took them before I went to Six Flags.
Oh my God, it'll be
scared.
like that one guy that we did mushrooms with, that was with my friend Katie. It's like Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah. They're just like, they're saying like profound garbage. Like, they're not really like, what if like things, man? And you're like,
not even that. It was just all like the fucking one thing he said the entire trip was, it's like Kool-Aid. Like,
yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean,
that's what happens when you dump a gallon of high-powered psychedelics on a brain that doesn't really do anything. Look, we all took the same amount, and we were like, actually, and he inspired us to try to figure out when Kool-Aid was invented. And then we went and looked for a Kool-Aid packet to see if it would say on it. It was just like, it never said like, since 1971. Like, like we were like trying to Google Kool-Aid by looking at a package of it because it was in 2001 and we didn't really have access to those things back then.
No, we did not.
Yeah. So I graduated therapy.
Yeah,
and I did, but yeah, I did want to talk about the second half of this. We might even skip Dear Asshole today. We'll see. We'll see if I run out of steam. Because this has been very funny, and I'm glad. I don't ever want to stay on topic. But
mental health is a topic, and we've been
all over that road. We've been drunk driving all over mental health pothole.
And just how brains work.
Yeah. But I wanted to talk a little bit about doing ketamine because I'd have a lot of people ask me. There's people ask me about my mental health journey in general, or saying that it kind of like helped them go, you know what, I should do this too, and that's fucking awesome. But I've had a lot of people ask me specifically, like, where did you go for this ketamine thing? And some people, there's like a guy that was like in the military that was like, wait, they do that here? And I'm like, yeah, you should probably sign up. It's at now. I should get like a fucking punch card for Advanced Brain and Body. Like, it's already basically free, but it's like they should like maybe like give me a kickback because of the amount of people due to my sphere of influence that I've told, like, where did you go to do that? I'm like, it's at this place. Go give them all your insurance money. I'll tell them that next time I'm there. Too. Oh yeah, but. And good for them. They're doing good things. So more and more people, I'd like to. We should take a little bit of credit almost, because it's like I'll bet that we spark something where it's like a lot more people kind of start taking advantage of this, and I hope they do. And then this will become on the back end a useful resource. In that, like, well, what do you do? What do you expect? And it's not going to affect everybody the same way. But I do want to kind of share. Like last time I talked about the ketamine thing was more about like, it was after the first time I did it and how it was insane that like, it's not more of a thing. And now here I am having done it a bunch and had a bunch of people come up to me and be like, where do I do this? And it's like, it's here. And it's like, I'm sure they've called them and cool. But I played around with it a lot because that's what I do. I was telling my therapist about this too. And it was interesting. And so it's like the first time I did it, again, I went in with intentions the very first time, but I was like, don't think about anything. Let the universe just do with you what it will. And from the first time all the way to the last time, a common thread, and I've never been a religious guy, and I've always actually been, even when it comes to like anything adjacent, like someone's talking about like,
even spirituality?
When people talk about like your sign or your like whatever, anything at all, I'd kind of be like, I don't know. And I've gotten, but again, it was like mushrooms originally made me a bit more spiritual in general. And again, my experience is not going to be everyone's, because it's like the amount of very positive and healing, homemade, not from a doctor's office psychedelic experiences have gotten me already to a certain point before I started this. So just know that. It was one of the first things I said to the nurses and techs there when I came down off of my first thing, being like, they're like, were you all right? And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I won't lie to you, I've done this type of thing many times before throughout my young life. And I've seen some of the people walk in here and it's like, I don't know, man. If like, oh yeah, Julie.
I think about that too.
Like, just some nice lady from the start. My doctor told me that this would help, and she just like leaves her body and goes into this like Egyptian sand 4-dimensional pyramid thing full of snakes that are telling her everything will be okay. It's like, is she gonna handle this okay? And they were like, there's been some kind of blowouts where people have just stopped coming, and I'm like, that sucks.
The first time super quick. The first time my first IV ketamine, it was weird because. During my session, somebody in the next office over was bawling, crying.
That's happened a few times.
I haven't heard anybody, since that, but it was, then I got that like mushroom talk in my head. I was like, oh, it'll be okay, honey, blah, 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 whatever. And then when I was like way out of it, the nurse came in, she's like, just to let you know, sorry about the crying that happens sometimes. And I'm just like, way off in the middle.
Yeah, like hi.
It's cool. But anyway, tell your stories. I'm sorry.
No, I actually like the crying. It's funny. My brain went to like, they're getting it out. That's good.
Yeah.
Like I was exactly. I remember making some progress. Yeah. And I was kind of like smiling about it. It was weird.
Not upsetting to me. It was actually more comforting, which is odd.
It was very human.
Yeah.
But. So, like, the very first time, I tripped absolute balls. Like, really, like, in a very good, I learned, like, you're like, maybe you should look at something, and that's where I was like, I just, Myriad, keep your eyes shut, like, and I was totally good, but I was, like, talking to myself, but also something else, and just, we were all referring to ourselves as we, like, we're, like, it actually took me a while. The nurse that was, like, I think that first time they usually have the nurse who's the best at it sit there with you a bit more on your way down, and I was like, we're becoming more human again, and then I started using I again. It was like, as it stepped down, I was like coming back into myself.
Oh, really? They did that with you? I
oh,
didn't
yeah,
have
yeah.
that.
But I was like, speaking in like tongue, like I was like talking in different voices, like to myself and stuff. Like, I was like, whoa, and the second time was like a little like that too. I had a very cool like multi-dimensional physics. So it's just like there's X and there's Y and Z, but there's also time and there's inward and outward and through. And I was speaking in this like accent, like parts of me wished I'd recorded myself because a lot of it would be boring.
You mentioned time with ketamine. There's a part in The Good Place that they're snorting lines, and it's like. They're saying, we're snorting the concept of time. And that's what I think ketamine is the concept of time. Does that make sense to you?
I do, but I think it's a lot more than that.
It is, but I'm just saying, like...
the trip experience, time becomes an interesting thing, because I thought about it a lot on it. Like, deeply that, like, there's like a fourth spatial dimension and a parallel fourth non-spatial dimension of time that facilitates the ability of space to exist, because, you know, if I were to sit in that chair and then later you were sitting in that chair, the only reason we're not smashed into each other is because time has separated those two things, making it like the second one, like I had a deep, like amazing Joe Rogan guest fucking spiral out about that shit.
That happened to me, like where I started to think like everything was made of plastic, because I was looking at my phone and I looked at all the like how it just looked so much. It is plastic, and then I was like, the chair is plastic, I'm plastic, this whole, you know, everything.
Whoa, that's synthetic. Almost like classic acid trip thought. Like that's.
It felt like everything was synthetic and I don't know, kind of like the Matrix, like it was all pre-made. I don't know.
Oh, I've definitely, and that's an interesting thing.
I never can think of the right words to describe.
No,
what I'm trying to
well,
say.
here's I actually understand, because there's two things about that. Like, you can either think of the world as the Matrix and everything being artificial as being like everything plastic and made here, or the fact that we are just a construction of something far greater outside of here, or whatever. And I had a lot of those thoughts, but the really crazy thing that I wanted to talk about is when I would go in. So, okay, for one, for me, because I started talking about this, how I'm not inherently very... definitely not religious, and even not all that spiritual, although mushrooms and things I'd gotten more so. After my ketamine experiences were a communion with the spiritual realm heavily. Mm-hmm. Fucking I can feel that, way heavily. Like, and I think it's part of why I've shifted so much into being like, I just want to be of service in my way. I'm not going to wash your feet like Jesus, but, you know, it's like, I want to help the people that are already around me rather than seeking out all of this validation from strangers and whatever. And it's because once I realized how spiritual the very first one was, and as I've said before, the very first one, I was like in the shifting sands of some 4-dimensional desert. And again, snakes are a positive thing for me, like being like all surrounded by snakes and things. And actually, there was another one where that happened, and I'll get to that in a second. But I went in with it's like, this is going to be a spiritual thing for me, and I will prepare as such. And that made it like really, really powerful. My wife is of a rather witchy spiritual bent, and talks about the various deities that she works with and things, and like who would be around her and stuff. And I definitely like saw them at one point. I saw, again, we have a lot of snakes here, and I'm pretty sure I like saw Medusa, or the version of it that would be, because I know that like the versions of all of these things that are written in stuff are a little cartoonish or, weird, like, they're probably all many faces of one thing, and so therefore are we. I don't know, but I got this very strong message that Medusa speaks to us through our children, and I imagined our biggest snake, Juniper, or boa constrictor, like kind of like wrapping around me and hugging me, like in a good way when I heard that, and like it was like things that were like almost I wouldn't have necessarily known until I like ran it by her later, and she's like, "But I was doing a thing about that today," and like it was totally like
things are just I mean it's also what I've learned with ketamine and have I was like just everything is connected, and like life and death begin at the same time. They happen simultaneously. So as soon as you die, you're also going and you're living.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to explain, and it sounds like really heavy, like drug stoner talk or whatever.
Well, but drugs are where religion came from, as we've, I believe, discussed on here before.
I saw it in the lights when they had the little galaxy machine. I was like, it was with like the white light and the blue light or something passing by each other. I had the thought of like, that's what it is. Oh my God, we live and we, like, when we die and then we're reborn, I'm like, simultaneously.
Well, the fact that we're all one big thing is like kind of invalidates the whole concept of death as we know it. It's very interesting. And like, but then I want to step past that. This is where it gets real weird because, so I did for the first time in a while a stand-up comedy thing, and I had happened to schedule that on a day that I was doing ketamine, and rightfully so, people were like, you and other people were like you're gonna be like tired after that, and I having done a few of them, I'm like, yeah, I will be. This is probably a mistake, but you know what? I'm gonna try to get through it anyway and just see. And it's also a funny aside. I kind of almost that day forgot about it because once I was there, people would kind of, I forget, people look at what I post online. They're like, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. What the hell are you talking about? Oh, right. But yeah, I went into it just being like, no, like I'm going to do comedy later. So it's like, and I was a little used to it by then. It was like my fourth or fifth time or something.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to just like think of all the things I was going to say on stage and try to like run through it in my head, maybe think of new pieces of it. And just see if I can stay on top of the trip. I usually just take my hands off the wheel or go, I would like to have like a spiritual thing. And I'm just going to like try to experience that through that lens as much as I can. But again, I'm not like trying to do anything. I'm just letting it happen. But instead I was just like, no, this whole time I'm going to like think and I'm going to use it to try to like open my mind up and like come up with things that are more interesting on the fly or whatever. And I got lost in the middle a lot because it's powerful stuff. But I kind of like kept on it the whole way through, just thinking that whole 45 minutes or however long you're actually.
40 minutes.
But yeah, and then thereafter, like trying to be like, okay, when I start, I'm going to mention this. And I just kept going and going and going. And I was like, wow, my blood was on cocaine. Like I was so wound after that. And I got to the thing and I was like, had a couple of beers to like be like, all right, I need to like calm down a little bit. But like, yeah, I wasn't even remotely tired. I was like fired up like crazy because I went in with the intention of
there you go.
I'm going to like do this. And then that gave me the inspiration the next couple of times where I was like, I want to be a person that's like connected to things and empathetic, and I think we're getting there and whatever, but it's just like I think it's a waste if I'm not someone who wields a certain amount of power, because whether it's to do good or whether it's to whatever, probably to do good because of where I've gotten with everything. But it's like, perhaps I can do more good if I had a lot more money and influence. I don't know. Actually, I definitely could. I could loan out money that I never cared to see back again without even thinking about it much more easily. And that would be kind of like handy. I don't give a shit. And wouldn't that always be nice? So I went in being like, I'm going to like commune with like, I'm gonna try to like draw like the spiritual. This is just sounds like so insane. Like draw the spiritual world into me. It's like I want to like elevate myself into a smarter and more powerful thing that can like actually. It's just like, and I just had this like weird like Kali Ma, just like it's like I was all like tensed up and fired up the whole time, and just like putting all this like crazy stuff together and like. But I mean, like, let's just remove. And again, I have a policy with the world of the spiritual, and it is this. And I was actually asked by someone to sort of, hey, do you think what I'm getting into is like me going crazy? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. Because, I have this policy of going like, okay, let's just pretend that there's no such thing as spirits or any gods or anything. Let's just pretend there's not that at all. Is what you're doing still probably good for you?
Right.
And is it hurting anything? And is it making things better? And it's like, and if the question, if it all lines up, it's like, well, then it's fine.
Yeah.
It's good. It's what you're doing is good, even regardless of that. Now, do I believe that there's much more than what we can see out there? I, at this point, certainly do. Mm-hmm. But I like to just pretend that it's not sometimes and be like, are we still good in that case? And if we are, then go crazy because, yeah. And so I turned that on myself during these things where I tried to have like a power trip during my fucking ketamine thing, which has changed me, I think, a little. And it's like, is what's really happening here if it's nothing magical? Well, if it's nothing magical, at the very least, if I'm healing the pathways in my brain with this drug and all these other things and having this experience, then I'm giving myself the kind of pure and non-phony, bullying, confident, real confidence to like actually be like, don't assume that someone in a position of power over you is always like holding a sword over your head. Like maybe they want to hear from you. Like maybe you could easily replace them as they're better. Like just don't be so like worried about everything all the time. And it's like, so it would be healthy as extreme and as insane as it felt at the time to go like, I'm going to try to make myself more powerful by bending the spiritual ketamine realm to my will as I do this thing in this dentist office in Minnetonka.
I find myself trying to like get answers to the future through ketamine and through the movement of the video I watch and the colors and whatever. And
you're divining things.
I was like, that's not gonna. I mean, sometimes it happens and I'll have this like really euphoric feeling, but it's interesting. It's interesting how it works through your brain, and every time is a little bit different.
It's also true.
I won't say that it's after you do it. I've done it. Gosh, maybe 25, 30 times now. I've had that many infusions. I mean, some of them have been pretty similar, but it's always, always just a little bit different.
Yeah, and I just to the thing you said where you like try to divine things or whatever, it's like if I had any piece of advice to give out, which I am not qualified to do, but it would be like, rather, like if you want to use those experiences, I think I have this inkling that this is the case. Like rather than trying to find something specific, because I don't think that's possible. I think it's too all over the place. Mm-hmm. But going like this time, I'm going to become someone who's more in tune with that sort of thing, so I can always see the future. Like that's the angle. That's the angle. It's
interesting to try.
And it's like, and maybe and let's just say there's nothing magical about it. Maybe it'll just be like you become so observant that subconsciously you can almost tell the future because you already know how this is going to go.
Well, see,
You've seen it
my
so many
problem
times
already, and that can get you stuck in the problems that I have, which is why I'm in therapy. It's like when you constantly observe the same things, you can kind of predict it, and that's where you think life is going to go.
That gives you the power to change it, though,
well,
and
exactly,
that is where you should. And that's what I'm saying, like. That being the focus, the broad, I always want to be able to do this. I always want to have this power over things, rather than like show me this one time. And it's funny. It's so like are you the cloak wearing devotee of the Renfield of like, show me this one time, master. I just need to see the winning lotto numbers and whatever. Or are you gonna be Skeletor in his golden costume at the end of fucking Master of the Universe, being like, I am the lottery and the future, and I deem these numbers to be the winners. Like I control the alpha and the omega. Like is that at least that's where I'm going with my therapy. But I'm
gonna give that a shot.
I think it's a good idea. I don't know. I think that there's only so many different ways for the human brain to be, and one of the most strong and self-actualized and like healthy brains you can have is one of a natural charismatic leader. And trying to push yourself in that direction mayhaps you may never become a leader of men or whatever. That doesn't really matter. But like trying to get yourself into that kind of like neurological programming of you could be that kind of person makes you a person that can handle a lot of things, sure, including whatever dumb old life throws at you. And yes, I've gone quite insane after doing all these things, but I don't know. This is pretty sound advice, and I hope that, you know, anyone that's reached out to me or will reach out to me that goes into ketamine treatments, I will just say this: go in with an open mind, be comfortable about it, let it take you where it will. But if you start to feel like you may have a little bit of a foothold on it and you become much more comfortable with your ketamine experience, try to bend the universe to your will and become a god. There's nothing unhealthy about that.
The Reverend John Wheeler podcast takes zero responsibility for the words, actions, or ideas of its host, guests, or listeners. Though the people on the screen may at times be speaking directly to you and may occasionally give you direct calls to action, neither Reverend John nor the Alchemical Cocktail Lounge are under any moral or legal obligation to answer for the potentially disastrous repercussions that may arise if you are stupid enough to actually follow the orders of a raving lunatic. Think for yourself and do whatever you want, because you're on your own. If anyone ever tries to sue this podcast, black SUVs will converge on your location in the darkness of night and you will never be seen again. Remember to like and subscribe.